tragedy in Texas. Seeking answers to the cause of the deadly school shooting in Uvalde and how authorities responded. Fight for the unborn. A U.S. state passes a law to protect life from the moment of conception. How the Biden administration is responding. Memorial Day weekend. We remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. And here's the deal. How a journey of Catholic faith brought Kellyanne Conway to the front lines of American politics. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 27, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Augustine of Canterbury. I'm Tracy Sable. Well, authorities in Texas have presented a detailed timeline of this week's horrific school shooting in Uvalde, which claimed the lives of 19 students and 2 teachers. The number one question was why there was a delay from the time police arrived until the killer was taken out.
The on-scene commander considered a barricaded subject and that there was time and there were no more children at risk. Obviously, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation and not a barricaded subject.
About 20 officers waited outside of a classroom for more than 45 minutes before a master key was used to enter, confront, and kill the 18-year-old gunman. Meantime, the National Rifle Association is hosting its annual convention in Houston today. The event comes just days after the shooting in Uvalde. 2 Texas lawmakers have decided not to attend out of respect for victims of the tragedy. And joining us now to discuss is Julio Rosas, senior writer for Townhall and author of the book Fiery but Mostly Peaceful. Julio, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. I understand that you were recently in Uvalde reporting on this tragedy. Can you talk to us more about that?
Yeah, so originally I was in South Texas covering the border crisis in Eagle Pass, which is about an hour away from Uvalde. And so once we heard about just how terrible the situation had occurred in that town, we went up there. And by the time we got there, things had, in somewhat of a twisted sense, had calmed down. People were waiting outside the school, still waiting to hear news of where their kids were at. The kids were still unaccounted for, probably about 5 hours after the shooter had been eliminated. And so, over the course of the next few days, it was really heartbreaking to see kind of the reaction. I'd been to Uvalde before, again in the context of covering the border crisis. It's a very small town. We've talked to the mayor previously. And it was just it was a big shock because, I mean, this is a town of only 15,000 people. It's not super close to any big city. It's a working class Latino majority population. And it's just, something that they probably weren't expecting to having to deal with. And yet it did happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's such an unbelievable situation. And as you know, there was another press conference that was held today in Uvalde, but still really, a lot of unanswered questions like why it took so long for law enforcement to go in there and take out that shooter and save the children. What more do you know about that?
So it is my understanding, and this is one of the questions that I had because we did know not only about the death toll, which was very, very high, but we also knew that police were on the scene within a short amount of time. And so then the question was, well, why was the death toll so high? If presumably the standard operating procedure that the police would have been following was to go in as soon as possible and take out the shooter. And it's because now we know they decided to wait because the on-scene commander, which is the chief of police for the school district, not the town, but for the school district, made the erroneous decision that this was no longer an active shooter. It was a barricaded shooter. And that does change police tactics for a little bit because basically coming from a military background myself as well, that we were taught that doorways are one of the most dangerous entrances that you can make in any close quarter confrontations. And so when you go from an active shooter to a barricaded shooter, that's why there was a hesitancy, I can assume, on the police's end to go in, because if you think, well, there's no longer a threat to kids, it's just one-on-one. That's why there might have been a hesitancy. Now, as obviously that was the wrong decision to make because kids were still making phone calls in the classroom saying that, no, we still need help. And so for whatever reason, the on-scene commander still either didn't get that information or still got that information and still went ahead. And that's why it had to take a Border Patrol BORTAC team to actually make the decision, okay, no, we're going in now. But, that was 40 minutes later. And so there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And it's just really tragic at the end of the day.
It absolutely is. And I wish we had more time to talk to you because so much more we can discuss. But unfortunately, we're out of time. Julio, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before President Joe Biden travels to Uvalde on Sunday, he tells graduates at the US Naval Academy the next 10 years will be the decisive decade of this century. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
On this Friday, we're hearing multiple messages coming out of the White House. They're ripping the state of Oklahoma over a new pro-life law there. And separately, President Biden is urging new graduates to be ready for rapid changes ahead.
Well, midshipmen, you made it. You made it.
President Joe Biden talks to more than 1,000 newly commissioned ensigns and second lieutenants in Annapolis, Maryland, saying they're going to face challenges unforeseen.
You're going to have to adapt, be ready to lead your people through whatever lies ahead.
Meanwhile, in the press briefing room Thursday, slamming the new pro-life Oklahoma law that bans nearly all abortions.
This law is the latest in a growing effort by ultra-MAGA officials across the country to roll back freedoms that should not be taken for granted.
Also, the White House released a statement describing what it calls a meeting on reproductive justice and civil rights, and saying participants cited fears about the challenges LGBTQI+ families are facing as states pass extreme laws restricting access to critical health care, including reproductive health care and gender-affirming care. But Oklahoma's governor tweeting, "From the moment life begins at conception is when we have a responsibility as human beings to do everything we can to protect that baby's life and the life of the mother." Governor Kevin Stitt also told voters he would sign every piece of pro-life legislation that came across his desk and says Oklahoma will always stand up for life. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The Senate's failure to pass an abortion on demand bill isn't slowing down efforts by Democrats to codify Roe v. Wade. They say keeping pro-abortion issues on the table will help them with voters in November. Republicans are shaking their heads, accusing Democrats of being out of touch. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has that story.
Democrats are fighting the clock as they try to legalize abortion nationally ahead of a Supreme Court decision which could overturn Roe. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer promises more votes on abortion are coming.
We're going to continue. This is a vital thing. We believe we are on the side of the American people, and we do not want to backtrack. Anything that backtracks on Roe is a non-starter for us.
Thank you.
Senator Tammy Duckworth says overturning Roe is personal. She gave birth to 2 daughters through in vitro fertilization. She says states could take action against doctors who perform the procedure.
Doctors who, for example, take 3 fertilized eggs and call 1 or 2 that is not viable to implant the single viable egg in me could be sued under these laws.
But Senators Bill Cassidy and Roger Marshall, both doctors, tell me abortion on demand doesn't square with public opinion.
And they're way out of step with the American people. The American people do not want partial birth abortion. The American people think that some restrictions are reasonable. And those are the people who are pro-choice.
I've delivered over 5,000 babies. Whether the issue is at the courts, whether this issue is here in the federal level, I'm going to fight for the sanctity of life. And let's just face reality. The Democrats have no value of life right now.
Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow will be heading up efforts to pass more abortion bills. But when asked what's inside them, she wouldn't elaborate. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Gunmen in Nigeria attack a Catholic rectory and kidnap 2 priests and 2 additional people. The attack happened in the middle of the night on Wednesday. A spokesman for the Diocese of Sokoto is asking for prayers for their safe release. Cuba will not attend next month's Summit of the Americas in the U.S. The decision by Cuba's president comes after contradictory reports that his country might be invited to attend, but that 3 other nations might be excluded as undemocratic. The summit begins June 6th in Los Angeles. While China claims the U.S. is seeking to smear its international reputation, Beijing specifically criticized comments yesterday by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who reiterated President Biden's call for a broad international coalition to oppose Russia's Ukraine invasion and to counter China's threats toward Taiwan and elsewhere. Coming up on this Memorial Day weekend, how we as Catholics can support our fellow Americans who are serving our country. On Monday, we will commemorate the men and women who died while serving and defending America. Memorial Day gives us the opportunity to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives to protect us and our freedoms. And joining me now is Archbishop Timothy Broglio from the Archdiocese for the Military Services. Your Excellency, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Very happy to be here with you. Thank you.
And you know, one of the things I want to talk about is so often many people forget the real meaning of the holiday. You know, we have our barbecues, we kind of celebrate this unofficial start to summer, but oftentimes that meaning is lost. Can you talk about the real meaning and what we can do to really honor those who've lost their lives for us?
Well, I think fundamentally the importance of remembering and perhaps also praying for those who have died serving our country, that's fundamental to this annual celebration, which has origins long back in our history. And you know, at one time I remember as a child there were parades and all sorts of things that would really call to mind the fundamental meaning. But now, as you said, it's somewhat escaped people as just a day off, and it's really much more than that. People did die to assure our freedom. And I also, as I tried to remember in our annual celebration of this event, there are also people still alive who carry within their hearts and their minds, and perhaps even physically in their bodies, the effects of war. And we must never forget that, because those are people who sacrificed themselves for us. And I think a third element to the celebration are those families that have lost someone. And you know, that is always a void that will never be filled. And I think it's a good occasion to pray for them as well.
Absolutely. Can you talk to us about what the Archdiocese, you know, what you all do for military members during that time? Maybe, you know, there's a husband and wife that are serving and one passes, or family members. How do you support them spiritually?
Well, obviously we try to pray for them, and we also, that's one of the responsibilities that the communities, the military communities have, is to try and watch over these people, to assure that they have their spiritual needs met, but also some practical needs as well, and trying to include them in the life of the community on a military installation.
And I also know last week was special Mass every year, the Annual Memorial Mass. Tell us a little bit more about that. That's
an occasion that the Archdiocese gathers, certainly the military from the Military District Washington, veterans, and it's an opportunity to celebrate at the National Shrine this commitment of men and women to our country, to thank them with the perfect prayer, which is the sacrifice of the Mass, and also to invite some of those families that are Gold Star families, that is someone who has lost someone in a military action, invite them to pray with us as well. And it's also a way to honor this service. We, in a certain sense, we telescope Veterans Day and Memorial Day in this one annual celebration. In fact, we call it the Memorial Mass. And we also remember in a special way the priests who have died during the past year, who at one time or another had served in the military or had served in the VA hospitals.
We're running out of time, but very quickly, you have a special collection. Tell us about that.
Yes, every year around Veterans Day, there is a special collection for the financial support of the Archdiocese for the military services. It's taken up in dioceses throughout the United States, and it's an opportunity to support the work that we do both in the United States and, of course, also in our military communities outside of the United States as well.
Yeah, it's so important. Your Excellency, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Up next, from her Catholic roots to the West Wing, Kellyanne Conway shares more of her memoir. Plus, a Catholic approach to the challenges of artificial intelligence. Kellyanne Conway describes her life and Catholic faith in her new book, Here's the Deal, a memoir. I recently spoke with Kellyanne to talk more about the challenges and triumphs on how her faith got her through it all. Talk to us about your time in the White House. I mean, you've had a remarkable career, including being the first woman to successfully manage a presidential campaign. And might I say, with a candidate who was not only a Washington outsider, but someone who had no previous political experience. So talk to us about that, path to victory for President Trump and for you and your time in the White House.
Well, I learned early on and followed my career arc this way to really respect what other people have to say. So pollsters need to be good listeners. Mom needs to be good listeners. People working in the White House need to be good listeners. And I learned to listen and appreciate and almost just adore, Tracy, the essential wisdom of Americans. They have some really fantastic ideas about how to right our wrongs, about how to solve our problems, about what our priorities should be and could be. I think if we played, take your constituent to work day, we'd see a very different Congress for a day or a week if we had those who are represented actually being the representatives, and that might work. Why do I say that? Well, because I had the benefit, really the privilege, the blessing in my career to work in all 50 states as a professional pollster, market researcher, as a focus group moderator. I've had that privilege, and listening to people and understanding that they don't all wake up and think about politics. In fact, very few do. But what is it they wake up and say? And reflect that back to them. And you find for so many people, their faith, whatever the faith is an essential component of who they are and how they spend their time and the choices and decisions they make. And that was always incredibly important for me. I've always felt like a little bit of an outsider. I was the only kid in my class who didn't have a father growing up in a little Catholic school in the mid-'70s. I'm an only child. I say until Mother Nature, puberty kicked in, I was always taller than the boys, chubbier than the girls. I always felt a little bit like an outsider. And then I dared to try to succeed in a male-dominated business, Republican consulting, Republican polling, and got elbowed and worse, and never really had that seat at the table freely given by the men in the consultancy, who always greased each other on the gravy train, walking RICO violation, really. But it made me fight harder. I can just shrivel up, go under the desk and cry and hope the emotional shrapnel doesn't hit me and say it's really unfair, oh, poor me, or fight a little harder, work a little smarter. And that's what I decided to do. And there I was as a quasi-political outsider who wasn't part of the sclerotic, almost corrupt consultancy that kept failing upward with people like John McCain and Bob Dole and Mitt Romney, and then say, you have to hire me. I worked on the last campaign. Well, and you lost. So that all said, I was ready for that moment because I had studied and I was a student of Hillary Clinton. I know what all her shortcomings and the problem that the country had with her integrity and her transparency. And there was a political outsider, Donald Trump, plucking me, not at the age of 29 or even 39, Tracy, but 49, to run that campaign in the last few months.
Kellyanne, I know we're running out of time, but I really want to ask you this. You had so many successes, and then you also had your fair share of challenges in the White House and at home, like so many of us do. Talk to us how you got through those times with grace, and also how your faith helped you.
Well, I tell my own children, I tell a lot of other people, Tracy, that nobody can make you feel badly without you giving your permission. And so far, I'm not granting it to anyone. Why? Because I know who I am. God made me. He has a plan for me. And I like to say now, and I really want to convey this to your audience, what God has created, no man or woman can cancel. And it's a great message, particularly at a fraught time such as this, and particularly for our young people in school, on the college campuses, who feel they must conform, they must comply, they must submit, they must be silenced. They can't really be who they are, even though they're told that's what college is all about. Be who you are, discover, learn, grow. And my faith is always guiding me. And also my faith also compels me to understand who my real friends are and are not. And them, my true friends who are like my family and my actual family will be holding my hand throughout this. But also my faith lets me understand how blessed I am to have these 4 children. And there's nothing that even comes close to that. There's nothing that can be touched by motherhood. Nothing. It is the greatest blessing of my life. Those 4 children, as I write in my book, are the 4 chambers of my heart: George, Claudia, Charlotte, and Vanessa. And they know how much I appreciate and love and respect and am in awe of who they've become and who they're still becoming, because they're all teenagers. And they know they've got my unshakable love and unconditional support. And we, in large part because, again, I know who God made me and God made them and gave them to me. I put my very last line in the book, and I thought about my faith as I wrote this, as I typed this last line, Tracy, was that God has given me burdens that did not break me. And he has given me blessings beyond what I could have imagined or deserved. Amen.
Kellyanne, thank you so much for your time today. Wonderful conversation. Good luck with the book, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you. Please pick up Here's the Deal. It's a great read. God bless you, Tracy. Take care.
And finally tonight, rapidly changing technology prompted a meeting in Rome to discuss new forms of intelligence from a philosophical and spiritual perspective. Experts from different fields of research and culture gathered for the conference about the relationship between religion and artificial intelligence. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thonhauser explains.
We're here in the heart of Rome at a conference discussing intelligence, artificial intelligence, animal intelligence, human intelligence, bringing together scholars of religious backgrounds, but also sciences. With me is Dr. Serazin, the president of the Templeton World Charity Foundation, which is supporting this conference. Why is it important to bring together church and science to discuss such a topic?
Well, when we think about some of the most fundamental challenges that our society faces, whether it's poverty or climate change or peace and security, it rests upon a foundation of knowledge, a understanding of ourselves and understanding of how it is that human beings can flourish. There's nothing as important as the concept of intelligence when it comes to our own self-definition. So today at this conference, we brought together religious scholars, theologians, philosophers, and scientists together because the concept of intelligence has a wholeness behind it. Truth has a wholeness, and only by bringing these different perspectives together can we arrive at a satisfactory definition and also satisfactory understanding.
Artificial intelligence is a concept where people are also easily becoming afraid of where this could lead us. How do you see that, and what was discussed today at this conference?
Well, I think artificial intelligence, of course, is the application of new computer science, new technologies, and so it's finding its way into much of our world. We interface with algorithms all the time. Importantly, the perspectives of philosophers and theologians and religious perspectives keep human dignity and the nature of the human person at the heart of all technological development. And so I'm very optimistic about the use of such technologies if those who are making the technologies consider the fundamental human dignity at the beginning.
What are your hopes? What do you try to achieve with supporting such a conference?
Well, I think science and religious perspectives have to be put together in order to make progress on any topic, on the way in which we treat animals or the way in which we regulate artificial intelligence. And so the humanistic perspective that religious traditions bring, together with data and the love of innovation and new methods that computer science and animal behavior brings together, is a powerful, powerful combination. And so we've already witnessed some amazing discussions today, and I can't help but think that it will have an impact on future policy and also future directions of the university.
And the church plays a major role there?
Sure. I think the church is a fundamental convener representing a tradition of many thousands of years. And so the frameworks that are brought to the concept of intelligence, the ways in which we approach nature, those are all rest on some fundamental understanding that goes back centuries. And it's science, though, today can help us update those definitions, those ways of thinking in new and different ways. And so it's really this powerful combination between science and faith that really excites me.
Andrew, thank you very much for being with us here in Rome at a conference on intelligence.
We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.